What's going on, everybody? It's PJ here with the SRNA Drip, and today we're going to talk about how I got my job as a surgical ICU nurse as a new grad. So let's get into it. So yes, I am in my scrubs. Yes, I did just get off of work, and the lighting is beautiful. I'm in natural lighting. I said, oh, I should make a video. So here I am. So we're gonna talk about some of the steps that I took in order to land my position in the surgical ICU as a new grad. First, you have to apply super early for all the residency programs that are going on at hospitals nowadays. Almost every place has a new grad residency program, but you have to apply super early because they are very competitive to get into, especially if you're thinking about going into the ICU for one, and even more specific, the CV ICU is almost, you gotta be on top of it to get in there as a new grad. Now, it is a little bit more difficult for December graduates to land these residency programs, only because a lot of them start with spring graduation days like August, September, even early October. So if you graduate in December, you have to do a little bit more investigation to hospitals that have year-round residency program starts. Just to give you a timeline, I started looking for jobs about April, late March, early April. So I definitely was still in school, focusing on graduating, but I knew that, I was feeling confident enough that I could start looking for residency programs, which is what I did. And I called around to several hospitals in the area, some that were not in the area, to figure out when the deadline was for their new grad programs and what do I need to do to apply. So I would advise you to definitely call around and find out what you need to do in order to apply to these new grad programs. But don't let the search consume you to where you can't focus on school, and then the next thing you know, you're not even graduating. Now what you gonna do? You don't have a license. So make sure that school is still your top priority, but you can shift your attention a little bit more towards the end when you see the light and you can get out. Invest your time in a good cover letter, a good solid resume. And I'm gonna do a separate video on cover letters, resumes, and curriculum vitae. They're totally different things. And some people, they tell me to look at my resume, and I ask, do you have a CV? And they say, yeah, I just sent it to you. Well, no, you sent me a resume, not a CV. They're different. So we'll do a whole nother video on that. And get in where you fit in. You wanna be particular about, getting into the ICU. That's number one. But if you don't land a job at a level 1 trauma center and they offer you a job at a level 2 trauma center in the ICU, and that's the only thing you have, take it, because that experience still counts towards that 1 year minimum that you need to apply for school. And once you start, then you can start looking around and you're getting your feet wet, you're getting more experience, and if the big hospitals call, then you can make the shift in the transition. But if that's all you have, run with it. Even if it's a community hospital, there's no guarantee that you're gonna get in with a level 1 trauma center. There's no guarantee that you'll get in with a community hospital. It's all about the total package. So don't get so hung up on, man, I have to get into a level 1, that you pass up 2 and 3 ICU jobs along the way, and now you're wasting time. So get in where you fit in. Number 2, prepare for the interview. This is not going to be a regular fly-by, get away with a smile type of interview. These new grad residencies, these managers that are hiring you, they want to know that we're trusting that you as a new grad are going to be able to comprehend the complexities of this ICU. You're going to have to demonstrate the knowledge that you learned in school and in clinical in order to impress them enough to say they have what it takes. Me personally, I was an emergency room technician for about 3 years or 2 years while I was in nursing school, and I did my practicum in an ICU. Fortunately, some people don't have that luxury or that option to either work in a hospital setting, be it ICU or ER or wherever, or get their practicum in the ICU. If that is you and that's your case, then you definitely want to research some scenarios in the ICU. Go back to your critical care chapters and look over some of the content, because there will be heavy content focused questions about what you know as a potential ICU nurse. And they're not expecting you to know everything, but they're expecting you to have a good foundation to be able to learn upon. Because if you don't have the foundation, it's going to be very difficult for you to adjust as a new grad in the ICU. When I did my interview, of course I was very nervous, but I was still confident at the same time. And it was no joke. I got 4 patient care scenarios. I'm going to try to remember what they were. One was a GI bleed, and they asked, what's the difference between an upper GI bleed, a lower GI bleed? What does it present like? What are the signs and symptoms? What scans or what tests would you use? What would you do if they're actively bleeding? My second scenario was about a stroke. Here we go. What's the difference between ischemic, hemorrhagic? What does it present like? What tests would you do? What are you looking for on a scan? Just a lot. And I was able to think on the fly some of the things I didn't know and just be upfront and say, I'm not too sure. I think this is it, because you're a new grad. They're not expecting you to know everything. My third scenario was about sepsis, and I was actually pretty comfortable talking about sepsis. So they asked, what is sepsis? What does it mean for the body? How does the body respond to sepsis? What tests are you looking for to confirm sepsis? What's the difference between sepsis, septic shock, Sears criteria? A lot. So you have to be able to answer those type of questions. It's not just very simple, generic med surg questions. My last scenario was about PE. What does it present like? What scans would you use? What lab tests would you look at? D-dimer, VQ scan, blah, blah, blah. Ventilator stuff. They didn't ask me about settings, which I probably would have been okay with, but they didn't ask, so hey, I got away with that. And then there were other questions about emotional intelligence. How would you handle certain situations? Tell me about a strength and weakness. Tell me about a tough time you had in school or in life. Tell me about yourself. Those type of questions as well. So make sure you practice those and not just the technical book stuff that you can't convey a conversation and you show no personality. And it's honestly the same thing with CRNA school interviews. More schools are going towards emotional intelligence questions versus book questions and CCRN questions, which you still need to know, but you also want to convey that you can communicate properly with a team, with a person, and you're not a robot and you're not awkward when you talk. Next, dress the part. Do not go in scrubs. If you do a shadow day, they will ask you to bring scrubs separately. You need to dress to impress. Wear a nice suit, tie, shirt, slacks. Ladies, don't overexpose. Make sure your makeup is done, but nothing is too distracting. No bright lips. Tie your hair up, off your neck, off your shoulders, all that good stuff. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Be ready for trap questions during the interview. These are questions that they ask you a certain scenario that they know you may not know. They're looking for you to say, I would ask for help. Or if they give you a scenario where you're just drowning in a patient assignment, are you going to be able to ask for help? Are you the type of person that is going to try to just solve everything on your own? Those are the people they don't want, okay? So just make sure that you recognize those questions and know when to ask for help. More than likely, they're going to ask you about your future plans. Try to give them some detail, but not too much. If they say, well, where do you see yourself in 5 years? My go-to to say in any interview is, well, I know that I want to advance my education further than my BSN, but I'm still weighing my options as to what path I should take. Boom, that's it. You know I have ambition, you know I have drive, you know I want to further my education, but I'm not telling you that I'm trying to go back to CRNA school, because that puts in their mind, red flag, this person is gonna leave within a year or 2 or 3, Do we really want to keep them around? Should we find someone who's going to stay a little bit longer with us? So try not to tell them too much of your plans, but don't make it so vague that it seems like you're keeping something from them. You still want to be upfront, but just know that you have to reserve it a bit. Ask questions. When they ask you, do you have any questions? Have at least 2 to 3 questions ready about the unit, about the type of vents that they use, what type of pumps do they use. These questions get them to say, oh, okay, that's a very intriguing and interesting question. We've never had anybody ask that question. That will make you stand out. So make sure you have questions prepared for them when they ask you, do you have any questions? Work on your strengths and weaknesses. And for me, I never say my weakness is. I always say something that I'm continuously working on is blah, blah, blah. And even then, I give them something that it is something that I'm working on, but I flip it to make it into a positive, so it doesn't leave them on a negative note, like you just don't know what you're doing. Lastly, you want to follow up. Many times people do the interview, they leave, they feel so good about it, but they forget to follow up. An email goes a long way. And make sure in your email you have your picture, whether it's Google or your school email. Make sure you have a picture, a professional picture of you, so that they can link a face with a name. And all the email has to say is, thank you so much for the time and opportunity to interview with you today. I'm very interested in this position and I hope to hear from you soon. That's it. It doesn't have to be too detailed, but don't make it too short. Make it personalized to that specific institution so it doesn't seem like you sent a mass email out, okay? And if they tell you that you should hear something back within a week, make sure you wait a week before you start to freak out and react and say, I didn't get it, and just have an emotional breakdown because you haven't heard anything back yet. Now, if you're like me, they're gonna call you right away. It's like, no, I'm just kidding. I waited a couple of days and then I emailed them in. So these are some of my biggest tips about landing an ICU job up front. So do your research. Make sure you apply early. That's number one. That is key, because you want to be able to at least land an interview. And after so many names, they're gonna shut it down and you have to start the search all over. So make sure you start thinking about that a month, maybe 2 months before graduations, maybe even 3 months. Start to look. If you feel that confident about school, start your search then. Make sure you prepare for the interview. Be as prepared as possible. Be on top of your game book-wise. Practice your interview skills. If you're not that much of a talker, make sure you work on those skills as well. Be ready for trap questions. Know when to ask for help. Ask them questions. Have 2 or 3 questions prepared for them about the unit, about the ICU, about the hospital, anything. Work on your strengths and weaknesses. Try not to give them too much information about a weakness, but make sure you answer the questions. And make sure you follow up. Please send an email. If there are 2 people in the interview, send it to 2 people. If there are 3 people, send it to all 3. Don't leave anybody out, okay? Grab cards. Ask if they have any cards available, and that way you'll have their contact information. They may give it to you outright and tell you to write it down, which is always a good thing. So, but make sure you use it. Follow up. And that's all I can think of right now. If you have any questions, make sure you hit me up. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Trump checks, remember that. And with that being said, I'm out.